So you're considering a move to Austin, Texas, and naturally you're either looking at North Austin, perhaps the suburbs, or South Austin with perhaps downtown. Either way, there are some things about either one that you just might not know about. So in this video, we will be going over the pros and cons of North and South Austin, and hopefully by the end, we'll have helped you arrive at your own conclusion. If that's the reason you clicked on this video, stay tuned because we're getting after it right now. Hello again, everybody. If this is your first time to the channel, my name is Frank and I'm part of a team of agents at the award-winning J.P. Goodwin Brokers located right here in the fabulous Austin, Texas. Each and every week we put out tons of new content, the good and the bad, all in regards to living in Austin, Texas, whether it be the pros and cons, comparisons of cities and states, vlog tours of certain areas and suburbs, and so much more. So if you haven't already, consider subscribing to this channel and ringing that little bell so that you're notified each and every time we put out a new video. In addition, we get reach outs all the time from people just like you who are in need of our help when relocating to this great city of Austin, Texas. We love learning about your lifestyle, getting to know you, and placing you in that perfect spot, making your move as smooth as possible. But the only way we can do that is by you reaching out to us. So do not hesitate. Whether you are 9 days away or 90, go ahead and shoot us that text, send us that email, give us that call any day of the week, any time of day. So yes, in this video, we are talking about North and South Austin, the pros and cons of each. And one of the reasons we're doing this video is because from a number of the reach outs we've gotten in the past, people we've ended up helping, they've naturally asked us, coming from out of state, they don't know any better, do I want Mueller or do I want Leander? Do I want West Austin or do I want Georgetown? And I realize it's true of most states with their own downtown areas that the contrast of the downtown metro area with suburbia is going to be quite drastic. However, in the specific case of Austin, Texas, in my opinion, it might be the most drastic contrast of all. The reason being is that for the longest time, Texas has been a southern hospitality type of place, a very warm place, a very welcoming place with kind people, much of it conservative for better and worse, and so much more. That is what makes Texas, Texas. And then you've got Austin, Texas, which is this very interesting, eclectic, artistic change of pace, this liberal hub within a sea of red, if you will, that is just such a different world. It seems like you're just in a different planet when you either enter the city or you leave it. And for the record, in this video, we are not just looking at specifically the North Austin area or the South Austin area in regards to them being perhaps neighborhoods themselves, but rather we are looking at the northern part of the greater Austin area and the southern part of the greater Austin area, Travis County and Williamson County, perhaps, if you will. So no, I don't mean to potentially deter, dissuade, or disenchant you from either North or South Austin, whichever of the two you've had your eye on, but surely, for better and worse, between the two, there are some things that you just probably haven't thought of yet. So be sure to stick around to the end of this video if you are able to withstand my brutal honesty so that yes, hopefully by the end, we will have helped you arrive at your own conclusion. Let's get to it. Let's begin with perhaps the most obvious difference between the two, and that would be the things to do. This is absolutely going to be a pro in favor of the southern part of the greater Austin area when being compared to the north. And I don't mean to insinuate that North Austin or its suburbs lacks anything to do, right? Because Leander is getting a brand new shopping center called Northline, which is supposed to be a sequel to the Domain, if you've ever heard of it. Leander is also getting something called Leander Springs, which is going to be a 4-acre lagoon with restaurants and shopping. Georgetown has its wonderful town square with its wineries, with its comedy theaters, with its local shops and boutiques, with its nature spots, with its lakes, and so much more. Round Rock is going to have Kalahari, the largest indoor water park in the country. Round Rock is going to have the premium outlet mall. Round Rock is going to have IKEA. Round Rock is going to have Dell Diamond. Pflugerville is going to have an abundance of shopping, and Pflugerville is also going to have its own outdoor water park. Cedar Park has, well, parks. And of course, I cannot forget that North Austin specifically has the tech corridor for work. I suppose that counts as things to do. And of course, the Domain. And if you aren't familiar with the Domain, we do have a number of videos on it specifically, but for the sake of just making my point, you've got your theaters, you've got your bar strip, you've got your restaurants, you've got your shopping. Any shop you can even dream of is there. But if you've noticed a theme of any of the places I just mentioned, it's that a majority of them, perhaps barring North Austin specifically as a town, are going to be things that are typical of suburbia. Things to do with your family, things to do on a Saturday afternoon or a Sunday afternoon. Whereas if you look at South Austin specifically, or rather just the southern part of the greater Austin area, you have similar things to do, yes, but then automatically by default you have a billion other things you can do too. The southern part of the greater Austin area is going to have what everyone wants to move to Austin for. If you want more diversity than North Austin, it's going to have it. If you want museums, it's going to have it. If you want murals, it's going to have it. If you want out of this world food and foodie spots and all these different locations and breweries, it's going to have it. Music venues, got it. Festivals, got it. Canoeing, paddleboarding, scootering, hiking, picnicking, flying kites at Zilker Park. It is going to have all of that and so much more. Don't get me wrong, many of the people that move to Austin and many of the people we help are coming with their families. So they might be coming for the schools, or they might be coming for the southern culture, or they might be coming for some of the nature spots or the lake locations in North Austin. However, honestly, Austin is going to be the more touristy place of the state of Texas, and so an abundance of the things that you would want to do as a tourist or as someone who is new to the city and to the state are frankly going to be all around or near the downtown metro area. Even though personally speaking, I am what you could call a John Denver person at heart, and for those of you who aren't quite familiar, just think Colorado, Rocky Mountain High, tall trees, bodies of water, mountains, tranquility, you know, a nice cabin in the woods. That's much more my style. Even though that is more authentic to who I am, I can't lie and say that I haven't considered living in the heart of downtown Austin. More specifically, there is a place on West 5th Street called the Monarch. It is one of my dream places with either apartments or condos if I intend to buy. And I kid you not, with that location, I can walk to 6th Street, I can walk to an Alamo Drafthouse Theater where they give you beer and food and all that good stuff. There's a Whole Foods in walking distance. There's a Trader Joe's within walking distance, a vet within walking distance for my corgi. And being downtown, you're going to have places that give you coffee and a cocktail. You won't find that in North Austin. If I wanted to keep my car in the garage and let it collect dust, in theory, I could scooter anywhere and everything is around. That's the thing. In North Austin, if you want to get from point A to point B, chances are you're driving at least 5, 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes. Whereas that is going to be the distance you would walk downtown. If you're scootering, cut it in half. And if you're driving, of course, a fraction. So yes, if I wanted to scooter to Lake Travis, I could do that. If I wanted to take my dog to Zilker Park, I could do that. And don't get me wrong, you know, a place like Georgetown, for example, is going to have Lake Georgetown. You can take your boat out there, you can bring a case of beer out there, you can camp out there. So there are nature spots in either place respectively. It's just that all of the fun things, the staples, if you will, of Austin, Texas are going to be in the southern part of the greater Austin area. Next, we're going to talk about affordability, and this will absolutely be a pro in favor of the northern part of the greater Austin area and a con for the south. Now, obviously, people like to move to Austin, Texas for the lack of state income tax. People like to move to Texas for perhaps its relative safety, or people like to move here for the schools. But the biggest reason of all is going to be that bang for your buck. Even though Austin is the most expensive city of all your options in Texas, yes, it still offers the bang for your buck. But the thing is, it's going to be more true the further north you go and less true the further south you go. Did you know, or if you've been a long-time subscriber by now you probably do, but if you're new to the channel, did you know that the average median home price in the greater Austin area is just over $600,000? Well, the truth is, in the north, Cedar Park, Leander, Hutto, Pflugerville, all of that's going to be on the low end in the mid threes, and on the high end maybe about $500,000, but on average about $450,000. So why is that so significantly more affordable, relatively, than South Austin, than Travis County as a whole? That is because the real estate in downtown, the real estate in West Austin, and to some extent South and East are going to be by default of location, much more pricey. Yes, it's true that you could take your $400,000, $500,000, or $600,000 from California, Washington, Oregon, New York City to Texas, and yes, even though Austin is the most expensive, even still, to Austin and buy big, more bedrooms, more square footage, near a golf course, maybe a theater room, maybe a pool, maybe you want to be by the best schools. But as soon as you go south of suburbia, even perhaps to North Austin specifically, which is going to be more Travis County, about 15 minutes removed from the city, the tech corridor, all of a sudden that budget doesn't buy you nearly what it could buy you 15-20 minutes north into suburbia. And as I already mentioned, even truer as you go towards downtown, southeast, or west Austin. Now I am generalizing, but for the most part, $400,000, $500,000 in South Austin, for example, can buy you, yes, a nice enough home, but it'll probably be in the neighborhood of 3-bed, 2-bath, 12, 14, 16, maybe 1,800 square feet, and most likely built in the 70s, built in the 80s. I'm not saying it's devoid of any new builds or anything built in the past 5 or 10 years, but if that is the case, it is going to be even smaller. So what I'm saying is, with the same budget, north versus south, you essentially, for the most part, will half the size of your home, you'll have the square footage, the number of bedrooms, and probably the age as well. And obviously what you're paying for more than just your house is your location, is your proximity to all of the things I mentioned previously in our last segment. So that is a fair trade-off. I'm not saying you're wrong for it or that it's a bad decision. You've just got to understand what's the trade-off. Do you want to do the commute and be further removed and live perhaps more luxuriously? Or do you not give a damn about that? You might want to be more minimalist and just be a hop and a skip away from anything you can dream of doing downtown. That is up to you, but I wanted to run it by you that, you know, bang for your buck. It's still here in Texas, absolutely, but it's relative to where in the greater Austin area you're going to live. Naturally segueing from the subject of affordability, we are going to briefly touch on the subject of property taxes. And this is going to be a pro in favor of South Austin or the southern part of the greater Austin area versus the north. And truth be told, it is still going to be a pain in your ass regardless of whether you're north or south, because you'll be living in Austin, Texas, or more specifically, Texas itself. And I bring that up because many of the clients that we've helped are used to tax rates of 1%. I've heard as low as 0.6, maybe 1.5, but my gosh, you get to Texas, it is going to be at least 2%, specifically in Austin, Texas. And the thing is, if you're downtown or you're in South or East Austin, for example, your tax rate is going to be 2.2, 2.3, maybe 2.1, or maybe 2.5, depending on if you're in a really nice part. Because again, it is relative. But I gotta tell you, if that sounds bad, you go to North Austin, you go to Cedar Park, you go to Hutto, you go to Round Rock, Georgetown, Leander, you were looking at property tax rates of at least 2.5, easily upwards towards 3%. The example I always use in all my videos to illustrate my point is, let's say you get a house that is appraised at $350,000. Relatively affordable in regards to Austin's standards, right? And let's say you get it at a tax rate of just around 2.5%, which would be in Central or South Austin, okay, that's pretty cool. But in North Austin, that's a steal, right? So let's say 350 at 2.5, that is still going to be just shy of $9,000 each and every year. So imagine if your tax rate is 2.9 and you get a house that is appraised at $550. I mean, it's just going to be so much more expensive. And that is something that South Austin or Central Austin perhaps has, even if it's by 0.1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, even still splitting hairs, it has that advantage over North Austin. And the reason it's so high in Texas, which is another question I get asked, is we have the bang for your buck affordability, relative. We have a lack of state income tax, so the question becomes, how does Texas make that money back? Aside from perhaps speeding tickets. I'm kidding, but it's going to be the property taxes. And That's just a tough pill that you'll have to swallow if you're going to be relocating here. Now, before we move on, let us know what opinions you have, what agreements you have, what disagreements you have, or questions for us you might have. Drop them all down below in the comments. We would love to get involved with you guys. In addition to that, consider liking this video if we've provided any value for you, as it really helps our channel grow. Be sure to subscribe. And lastly, if there's anyone in your life who you know is contemplating a move to Austin, Texas, and would like to learn more, feel free to share our content with them and spread the good word. Okay, so next on this video, I'm going to talk about a big one, in my opinion, that is very important to mention. And I make it a pro in favor of North Austin as opposed to South, but I do it reluctantly, I do it hesitantly, and I do it really to split hairs, because this one is going to be more subjective to who you are, but I am human, I am subjective myself, which is why I'm going to personally give the nod to North Austin getting the pro instead of the con, and here's why. The subject is culture. Austin's culture and Texas's culture. And one of the biggest reasons people love moving to Texas, I hear it in the comments, I hear it with your reach outs, and we hear it from the clients that we help close on homes. One of the biggest reasons is that Southern hospitality, the Southern culture, the kindness, the manners, the respect, all very real things. It's not just a shtick, it's not just a stereotype or a cliche. Ask anyone who's here and they'll tell you it's very true. Not just of Austin or Texas, but just the South. I mean, you leave California, you leave New York City or the Northeast, and you come here, and people are just warmer, more genuine, kind, welcoming people. Yes, you still have your jerks. I'm not saying we're devoid of a-holes or anything like that, but you know, it's going to be imbalance, perhaps in favor of nice people. Now, the thing is, that is going to be true of the greater Austin area outside of the downtown metro area, or perhaps west, south, east, or even north enough in the tech corridor of Austin, Texas. The reason being is that Austin is such a hotspot for relocation, has been for a number of years, and will continue to be one because of Silicon Valley basically migrating here from Northern California and creating something called Silicon Hills here in Austin, Texas. You've got Apple, you've got IBM, you've got Google, you've got Tesla, you've got Samsung, you've got Dell, Facebook, and so much more. In addition to that, we've got the University of Texas at Austin, where people come from all over the country. We've got music festivals, we've got music venues, we've got art programs. So in addition to people being transplants for their work, we've also got a number of people who come here perhaps as tourists or perhaps as students and stay here. These are the people, more often than not, that you'll find in the tech corridor, that you'll find downtown in Southwest or East Austin. Of course, I am generalizing, but that is going to be the feel much more than Cedar Park Land or, you know, the suburbs of North Austin. So what I'm getting at is that if you are going to live either in downtown or near downtown, you might miss out on the community, on the congregation, on the warmth that you will find in other parts of Austin or, of course, the rest of Texas. Austin, in that way, is very similar to perhaps Los Angeles, to an extent. Of course, there's only one LA, and that is a beast for better and for worse. But what I'm getting at is that it's going to be a much younger demographic. It's going to be a demographic of people who perhaps aren't from here, a demographic of people who some might be pretentious, or some might be rude, or some might not have grown up with the Southern hospitality ingrained in the very fiber of their being. Now, what's good about it is that you're going to have more diversity, you're going to have more inclusion, you're going to have an artistic spirit, you're going to have an eclectic spirit, but it's not without its drawbacks. You're going to see the hipsters, you're going to see the IPAs, the avocado on toast, the crystal shops, you're going to see your Instagram types, for example. So, not to say that's all bad, but it's subjective, right? I'm someone who personally might not want to be around all of that. I lived in Los Angeles, and a year is all I could take. It was very fake, it was very pretentious, and I'm not saying that everyone in Austin is that way, no, of course not, but it is going to be much more like in LA than perhaps New York. And New York is a place that gets transplants all the time, so not everyone in New York is obviously gonna be from New York, but I've been to New York too, and there's a certain community there. There's a certain spirit there. There's a harmony and a soul to New York that perhaps LA lacks. And that's just by default of the nature of Los Angeles and the entertainment business in Hollywood. So Austin, if it's like either one of those two cities, it is going to be more like Los Angeles, for better and for worse, which is why I subjectively and personally do give this as a pro to the northern part of the greater Austin area, because it would seem as soon as you leave Austin, as soon as you leave downtown, you leave even the tech corridor, which is north of downtown, then you're in Texas. It's like you're not even necessarily in Austin anymore. You're just in Texas suburbia. Drivers who let you in and tip their hat for you, people who invite you to their parties, total strangers, you know, giving you the time of day. That, I'm not saying it's absent downtown, but you know, when you're comparing the two, it's like night and day. So for me personally, I put that ahead, but I could be talking to someone who's very different from me, who might not give a damn about Southern hospitality, and they want to live life in Austin, Texas, and enjoy the fruits of what Austin has to offer. If that is you, by all means, it is a perfect fit, which is why this one is splitting hairs, but I'll give the pro to North Austin, and you can decide for yourself which of the two you like more. Moving right along, we're going to briefly talk about the subject of safety, or lack thereof. And off the bat, I am going to say that one of the many reasons people move here all the time is because of its safety. So I don't mean to insinuate that you're going to be sleeping with one eye open necessarily wherever you live in Austin. Having said that, I'm going to give this pro, as you might be able to predict, to the northern part of Austin, the suburbs of Austin, because it is going to be, by nature, by default, inherently a safer place to live. That's where the schools are, that's where the families are. And even though also, yes, South or the downtown metro area is relatively safe, in the past year, we've seen spikes in murder, we've seen spikes in car theft, we've seen spikes in aggravated assault, we've seen an increase of tents and homelessness that is really spreading even to northern Austin more and more each day. And it's normal in any state for its city or its surrounding areas near the city to have fluctuating statistics for crime and safety, yes. The thing about Austin though is that in the past year alone, these things have not just increased, but they've increased dramatically. And it has been a talking point for a lot of local Austinites who might be growing concerned or might be beginning to be rubbed the wrong way. Like, yes, you agree to any risks before you move to any place, of course, but when you hear that it's just alarmingly increasing, that can be off-putting. And it's hard to say exactly why, because then it can get controversial. And I don't know enough about it to proclaim my own opinion and say this is why, or even debate it. I am someone who, if I don't know enough about something, I'll stay out of it and I won't pretend to know. But as far as the conversations I have heard, it's either political, it's either defunding the police, it's either the influx of so many people moving here all the time from all over, to where it could just be a natural evolution of crime and safety in a very densely populated city. So it's hard for me to say exactly what the reason is. It could be all of those, it could be one of those, it could be none of those. But the truth of the matter is the safety has been decreasing and the crime has been increasing. Which is why I'm not saying that North Austin is devoid of that, because crimes still happen, even in the suburbs. That's a thing anywhere, yes. But by default, by nature, you are going to perhaps sleep a little better at night in safe, quiet suburbia than perhaps you would on West 5th Street or in South Austin or South Congress, so on and so forth. Next, I'll briefly talk about the schools, and this is going to be another pro for the North, and I promise you guys, I'm not trying to pick sides here. I'm just being honest with the different talking points and the different categories that you have to compare between two areas of a greater Austin area. And like I've mentioned, yes, people come here for the bang for your buck. People come here because Texas is, even though I just said what I said, still relatively safe, the no-sit income tax, etc., etc. But another one of those big reasons is the schools. The state of Texas, not just Austin, but the entire state of Texas, really likes to hang its hat on the quality of public schools. I was fortunate to grow up in a public school district in the greater Austin area, but I thought that was normal. As I grew up, as I traveled, as I met people and broadened my horizons, I would soon learn that no, it's not the same for everyone. And it's not even a private school versus public school thing, it's all public, right? However, I've heard stories of outdated technology, or not enough books, or broken ACs, or homeless people sleeping in stairways. I've heard horror stories of other people's public school experiences. And just growing up in Texas, in the greater Austin area, I certainly am not someone who grew up with much money, but I got to feel like I did because my public school experience was amazing. My high school had like 4 buildings. One of them was built for fun in the later years as an auditorium, for choir shows, for assembly, for theater, and then we had a brand new football stadium built across the street that could compare to some college stadiums because Texans love their football, and that was very normal for me. And so the truth of the matter is, if you are doing your homework and you are seriously considering a move to Austin, Texas, and you have a family, surely 2 districts have popped up on your radar. One of them is the Leander Independent School District, which is where I went, and the other is the Round Rock Independent School District, both of which are the cream of the crop. And I'm not telling you anything you can't find by Googling, but surely the Austin Independent School District is not going to be nearly as high up on the list. And the Austin Independent School District obviously covers central, south, east, a little bit west, and a little bit north of that greater Austin area, the Travis County area beneath suburbia. And no, I'm not saying those schools are trash. I'm not saying those schools are bad. I'm sure they're very respectable. But obviously when you're coming here with a family and you are prioritizing your children, you are going to naturally feel inclined to pick what is more revered, what is more established, what is more respected to a certain extent, and that is simply going to be found in the northern parts of the greater Austin area. So, pro to the north. Lastly, we're talking about the subject of travel, and this is going to be a pro in favor of South Austin. And the reason why is, if you're living in the greater Austin area, and you want to perhaps go to San Antonio for the week of Fiesta, or you want to go to Corpus Christi, or you want to go to Brownsville, or you want to go to South Padre Island, any of these places, by default of living south, you are naturally closer to these places, even if it is by 20 or 30 minutes, which might not be super significant, or it might be, depending on who you are. Yes, if you're more north, you will obviously be a little bit closer to New Mexico, Oklahoma, Dallas, but the truth of the matter is, for people who live in the greater Austin area, when they travel, a majority of the time, it's to one of Texas's beaches. Even though our beaches aren't necessarily great compared to the Pacific Coast, for example, but we do have beaches, and that's where a lot of them like to do their vacationing. Another benefit is that if you live in South or Central Austin, that Travis County area beneath suburbia or beneath North Austin, because by default of the word central, if you want to get to suburbia, it's right there, 15 to 30 minutes away, depending on where, depending on traffic. If you want to go to West Austin, hop and a skip away. Lake Travis, take the boat out with your family, right there. If you want to experience the arts and the culture and the soul of Austin, Texas, East Austin, hop and a skip away. And with freeways like Mopac being improved and finished, and with freeways like the 183A toll road being improved and finished, now getting around the greater Austin area, albeit imperfect, is much easier than perhaps it was just 5 or 10 years ago. If you are stuck in North Austin, stuck in suburbia, pretty much if you don't want to do what you're limited to do up there, which I already went over, and you want to experience more things to do, you are essentially forced to leave and to drive a relatively great distance. And on that note, I'll lastly talk about the subject of commuting. A majority of people who relocate to the greater Austin area, if they don't work from home, are going to either work out of the downtown area, the tech corridor, or maybe Round Rock, which is about as north as major employers go. So if you live downtown, if you live in South Austin, West Austin, East Austin, or a little bit north of the city, your commute is going to be a breeze. But if you're living in Leander or Georgetown, for example, and you're working out of the tech corridor or even out of downtown, your daily commute is going to be closer to 30 minutes, 40 minutes or more if traffic is bad. And I realize if you're coming from San Francisco or New York City, 30, 40 minutes, sign me up, but you might not be coming from there. You might be coming from a place where you are used to biking or walking to work or driving just a couple blocks. So, you know, it depends on who you are, how bad that distance is. But obviously the further north in the greater Austin area you go, the less major employers you're going to have. So if you are someone who is factoring in a commute, I would think twice before locating to one of these suburbs in the northern Austin area, unless you're cool with the commute. But that's just something I want you to keep in mind when you're arriving at your own decision. So yeah, maybe you heard everything I've had to say in favor of North Austin and think, that's all well and good, but it's not for me. Maybe you'd like to buy a house near South Congress. Maybe you'd like to buy a house towards the west, near the hills, near the lake. Maybe you'd like to buy property in the east and be immersed in the artistic culture. Maybe you want to buy a condo downtown and walk everywhere you could ever want to walk. Or maybe you're someone who might not want to be immersed in everything that South or Central Austin has to offer, and maybe you just want to dabble in it. Maybe you want to have it as an option whenever you're in the mood to go, but you'd rather reside in perhaps a more safe place, in perhaps a more widespread place, in perhaps a more affordable place. Regardless of who you are, whatever walk of life you're from, and whatever you're seriously contemplating, that is what we're here for. We do pride ourselves in getting to know you and finding that perfect place for you and making your move as smooth as possible. But the only way we can do that is, again, by you reaching out to us. So do not hesitate. Whether you're 9 days away or 90, send us that email, shoot us that text, give us that call any day of the week, any time of day. We've got your back when moving to Austin, Texas. And again, each and every week we put out tons of new content all in regards to living in Austin, Texas, the good and the bad. So if you haven't already, consider subscribing to this channel and ringing that little bell so that you're notified each and every time we put out a new video. If you've got any opinions, agreements, disagreements, questions for us, drop them all down below in the comments for us to get involved in. If we've provided value for you, consider liking the video as well, as it really helps our channel grow. And if there's anyone in your life who you know is contemplating a move to Austin, Texas, and would like to learn more, go ahead and share our content with them and spread the good word. So until the next one, you guys, my name is Frank. This is Living in Austin, Texas, and we will absolutely catch you later.